This is part one of the Wholecloth Patterns Logan Bag Sew Along, where I'll take you step by step through making your own bag. Before we start sewing, we'll go over the features of the Logan bag and talk about some great fabrics to choose for making this bag. Finally, we'll sew the exterior of the bag in part one, and then we'll continue to finish the bag in the part two video. First, let's get an overview of what this bag is all about. The Logan bag is a drawstring bucket backpack. The bottom has a simple circle base with piping the whole way around the bottom edge. The front has a snap pocket, and the top has eyelets around the opening that hold a drawstring that becomes the strap at the back of the bag. When you wear the bag, it automatically closes the top opening. I also like to use the fisherman's knot to tie my strings at the back of the bag, because then it also makes the straps adjustable. The interior of the bag has a full lining, and there is an interior zipper pocket. The Logan bag comes in two different sizes. This is the standard size. It's great for an overnight bag or maybe a beach bag. It holds a lot of stuff, and it really excels at holding soft stuff. So like beach towels, clothing for a sleepover party. This is a great bag for that kind of stuff. This is the mini size, and it's more of a daytime essentials bag. It will carry your wallet, your phone, your keys, a bottle of water, maybe a snack. It's also the perfect size to carry a bottle of wine. Next, let's talk about fabric. The texture, stiffness, and weight of your fabric has a huge impact on the character of your final bag. The pattern recommends using a heavyweight fabric like this 10-ounce cotton canvas. It's really sturdy and durable. It holds its own shape even when there's nothing in the bag, and it requires very little reinforcing. This is a simple way to make a sturdy bag, but it's nice to have options. If you want to use a lighter weight fabric for your Logan bag, you've got a couple of options. This bag is made with a cotton linen blend canvas that is about 7 ounces per yard. And to get the structured look that I like for the Logan bag, I fused the back of all the body pieces with medium weight interfacing. This adds a lot of durability to the bag. But if you want to use a really lightweight fabric, the interfacing alone might not be enough. Another way to expand your fabric options is by quilting. You can quilt just about any woven fabric and give it enough structure to use it to make a bag. Here is one that I made with lightweight cotton denim that I think was about 5 ounces per yard. And this quilted one is the example from today's sew along. It's made with a very lightweight woven cotton, quilted together with a single ply of cotton quilt batting. I've got a whole tutorial dedicated to how to quilt fabric to make bags, so I'm not going to go into it here, but I will link to that tutorial in the notes below the video. Before we start sewing, I just want to highlight a couple of videos that will help you when you're making your Logan bag. The first one is how to make your own piping. Piping is included in the written pattern instructions, but I'm not going to go over it here. I also have tutorials for how to install the snap, how to install the eyelets, and as I already mentioned, how to quilt the fabric to make a bag. I'm not going to include those techniques in the sew along, but the individual videos are part of the Logan bag playlist, or you can find them linked in the notes below this video. Now, let's get started. For the bag I'm making today, I already have all of my paper pattern pieces cut out or assembled, and I've gone ahead and I've cut out all of my fabric pattern pieces. Here I have the pieces for the lining, and here are the pieces for the main body of the bag. For this bag, I'm using self-quilted fabric that I've already quilted. I've also made my own piping to match the bag. With all of our pieces cut out and ready to go, we can start sewing with step 1 in the sewing pattern. Here I have the cord loop pattern piece, and I've already fused the back with medium weight interfacing. Because I'm using a very lightweight fabric, I think I need the extra stability for this piece. The first step is to fold the cord loop piece in half with wrong sides together and align the short edge. I'm going to pin this and then sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance across this short edge. To shape the cord loop, I'm going to press open the seam allowance so that it's running down the middle of one long side of the cord loop, and I'm going to press these folds into the sides of the cord loop. Now I'm going to grade each side of the seam allowance by about half. Here is the finished cord loop. When we attach it to our bag, we're going to fold it in half again, so you won't see the seam allowance on the finished bag. As an alternative to the matching fabric cord loop, you could also use a 1 inch wide strip of webbing that's the same length as the cord loop. If I do that, I usually serge or zigzag stitch each cut end so that it won't fray and come off the bag. I'm going to set these aside until I'm ready to use them. Now I'm ready to construct the body. Here I have the exterior pocket back and the exterior pocket front, and I've marked the notches with pins to make them a little easier to see. The first thing I'm going to do is fold the pocket front across the fold line at the notches and press a crease across the fold. I'm going to open the pocket front back up and align this short edge that doesn't have the notch with the short edge of the pocket back that also doesn't have the notch. I'm going to put right sides together and I'll pin and sew across this edge. With the front and back of the pocket assembled, now we're ready to install the snap. Use the pattern information to locate where your snap will go on the front of the pocket. And at this point, if you haven't reinforced all of your body pieces with fusible interfacing, you'll probably want to reinforce just where the snap goes with a small piece of fusible interfacing. So here I've fused a rectangle on top of where the front snap will go, and this little 2x2 square on the back where the back snap will go. Use the manufacturer's instructions for whatever brand of snap you're using. I usually use heavy-duty snaps when I make Logan bags, and if you'd like a tutorial for how to install those, I'll link to it below the video. Now I'm ready to attach the side panels to the front pocket. First, I'm going to align the long edge of one of my side panels with the long edge of my pocket with right sides together. I'm going to pin along this edge and then sew the seam. Next, I'm going to grade this seam allowance. We're going to press the whole seam allowance toward the side panel, so that portion of the seam allowance will be toward the bottom. So I'm going to grade it by about half, and I'm just going to leave the seam allowance for the pocket panel side alone. Here you can see I've just cut away some of the bulk from this seam allowance. Now I'm going to open it back up and press along the seam, making sure the seam allowance is pressed toward the side panel. Here you can see that all of my seam is pressed toward the side panel, and now I'm going to top stitch along this seam on the side panel about 1/8 of an inch away from the seam. Here you can see my line of top stitching along the seam. Now I'm going to repeat all of those steps with the other side. Here's the front of my assembled bag. The next step is to mark the position of the eyelets across the top opening of the bag. To do that, I'm going to use the guide from my pattern pieces. I'm going to align the notch at the center of the guide with the notch at the top center of my bag and make a mark at each X. I really kind of think of these as tentative marks because once we sew the top seam, we might want to adjust the marks up and down a little bit based on how accurately we've sewn the seam. But using the Eyelet guide will give us the location of them from right to left. Just keep in mind you might want to adjust them later when we've actually sewn the top of the bag. I marked mine just with a little dot of tailor's chalk at each of the X's. Now I'm ready to join my bag into the bucket shape. To do that, I'm just going to align these two outer edges of the side panels, pin, and then sew. Now I'm just going to press open this seam allowance, being careful not to put creases in the sides of the bag. And then I'm going to set it aside while I construct the base. For the base of the bag, I have my main fabric piece that I've already quilted and my stabilizer piece. The stabilizer just gives some extra durability to the bottom of the bag so that if you had a water bottle or maybe a camera in your bag, it wouldn't distort the shape of the bag. And this goes on much like fusible interfacing. One side is just fabric and the other side has the glue dots. So I'm going to attach this to the wrong side of my base the same way I would fusible interfacing. And I just want to line it up so there is an even seam allowance the whole way around. If it's a little too big or not quite the right shape, go ahead and trim a tiny bit off of it. Now I'm ready to attach my piping. I'm going to start to attach my piping with about an inch or an inch and a half of tail hanging off past the center point. And I'm going to align the raw edges of the piping with the edge of my base the whole way around and pin it. Now that I have it pinned the whole way around the base, I just want to make sure that the piping is crossing and then veering off over the seam allowance at the center back point. Now I'm going to use my piping or zipper foot to stitch around the outer edge of this circle as close to the piping as I can. I'm going to trim the overhanging ends of the piping to align with the edge of the base. Now I'm ready to attach the cord loop, and I'm going to use the webbing one that we made earlier. I'm just going to fold it in half lengthwise, and then I want to align the middle of the short edge of my cord loop with the back notch of the base of the bag. That's the same point where we crossed over the ends of the piping. When I'm attaching the cord loop, because there are so many layers of fabric right here in this one spot, I usually start with the needle in the middle of the cord loop and sew forwards to one edge and then back stitch toward the other edge. And I go back and forth a couple of times just so I have some reinforcement on this point that's going to have a lot of tension on it when I'm using the bag. Here's the finished bag base, and you can see how I zigzagged within the seam allowance and how I lined up the cord loop with where the piping crosses at the back. And now I'm ready to attach the body of the bag to the base. With the right sides together, I'm going to align the outer edge of the base with the bottom edge of the bag. And I want to line up the notches. So I have the front notch marked on my bag and the front notch marked on my base. And I'm just going to use the seam allowance and my cord loop to align the back. And I usually use clips for this, especially when I'm making a quilted bag, because you've kind of got a lot of bulk. Once again, I'm going to use the piping foot when I sew this seam so that I can stay as close as possible to the piping the whole way around. It can be pretty bulky, especially where the cord loop attaches and the piping crosses at this back notch. Just take it slow. If you have to sew the seam in a couple of segments, that's fine. Here's my bag with the base attached. And I'm just going to turn it right side out to double check that I didn't get too close to the piping anywhere. And if I did, I'll just go back and fix it in pieces. That looks pretty good. So now I'm going to set this aside and start working on the lining. We're going to pause here for today. We've made a ton of progress sewing the exterior of our bag. We'll pick things back up in the part 2 video, where we'll start by sewing the lining and go right on through to the end. Thanks for following along with me today. I would love to see what you've made. You can share your project by using the Wholecloth Logan Bag hashtag on Instagram, and be sure to click subscribe for more videos from the Wholecloth Patterns sewing channel.